JRPGs are notorious for being big endeavours that take you on grand adventures, all with the singular focus of normally killing God. They're also known for being flipping long. Look, this is also preface that, well, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 came out at like the very end of July 2022, and I did also buy it day one release, and maybe I did literally just finish it like 3 days ago. Look, I've had a lot on, okay? So, Xenoblade is a rich series of fantasy games that spawn a whole many number of games. The notable games start with Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii and slowly work their way up to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 on the Switch. They're well known for involving huge, sweeping and giant landscapes for you to explore on, sometimes literally on the backs of giants. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the conclusion of a trilogy of games which you may not have necessarily realised were all connected. Because I didn't, other than the fact that everyone's got very rich accents. And I've played most of them. Look, this is a long game, and this is probably going to be an equally as long video. And honestly, I'm just going to be upfront and honest here. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is good, it's really good, it's got an incredibly compelling story, and I very much actually enjoyed the experience. Anyway, I'm now going to spend a good long while absolutely decimating everything about this game by being needlessly over-analytical. The world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is one of constant war. Two queendoms, Agnia and Keves, are locked in a ceaseless war, all in the quite literal process of extending their pitiful lives through the extinguishment of others. Yes, everyone has a ticking clock that ticks down, and when it reaches 0, I assume death. The only way to extend it is by killing enemy combatants and letting the giant robot they all live in consume the tasty life essence.
Certainly. But what we need most is life itself.
Delicious. If you ever needed a greater example of the futility of war and the senseless violence that comes with it, you're in luck, because Xenoblade Chronicles 3 does not shy away from pointing out how this is ultimately dumb.
Fighting in order to live, and living to fight. That's the way of our world. Ionios. Cruel irony that it should mean eternity. Because slowly but surely, our world is now dying.
But we follow Noah and his team as they try and survive the topsy-turvy world of war that they find themselves in. That is, until they meet another 3 would-be protagonists, in Mio and her gang.
Hang on. The fighting stopped. When did that... At this rate, one of us is going to get killed.
But sadly, with them being on opposing sides, there is just no real way that they'll ever see eye to eye. There's no way they'll ever communicate, and they will be forever separated by the constant conflict which they are routinely choked by. If only there were some form of third party to appear out of nowhere to make them join their forces.
Time for Guernica Van Dam to make an entrance.
I messed up.
Oi! Don't go stopping on my account. Get back to killing each other. Come on.
Yes. Yes. Yes! Through the delightful introduction of a geographically uncertain Satan,
Oh wow, this is some entertainment.
your teams combine their forces to take on a new foe. Quite literally, gaining the ability to fuse into a hot new form of Ouroboros. It's pretty rad. Made all the sweeter by our delightful protagonist being freed from the inexplicable need to consume the life of others in the wacky wah-wah west that is war.
You see it? That's the Ouroboros ring.
But that leaves them at the hands of their greatest enemy, time. You see, being shot, stabbed, or smashed is not the only way in which you can die. I would know. For, you see, we are all one day left at the mercy of the incredible, cruel hands of the passing of time. Our characters have a total of 10 years to live, having been born a 10-year-old. And our dear Mio is rapidly approaching the end of those 10 years. Your new quest to stop Mio's inevitable descent into old age colours the story as you're constantly reminded that the clock is ticking. With each passing moment, Mio comes closer and closer to death.
Yeah!
Wow! You muppet!
The game has a bit of a hard time being consistent with its tone. War. Why must we engage in war? Everything I've lost, all my friends, everyone I've lost for nothing. For what? For a general off miles away? For a queen who doesn't know my own existence? Oh God. Did somebody say cooking? But eventually, once it's done shoving hundreds of tutorials down your throat, you can go back to a story of one's own futile struggle to rage against a system that is heavily weighted against you by the powers that be, such as God itself.
You muppet!
With that act of comical violence, let's slide our focus away from our own dreadful existence and the reality of it all, as well as the harsh, undeniable fact of man's ability to enact violence upon man, and instead shift to, the meat and potatoes of most video games, combat. Yes, we are just continuing to look into the world of cruelty and violence. The combat is like every other Xenoblade Chronicles game, by which I mean slightly impenetrable, but enough stuff happens on the screen to make it feel nice. You move your controlled character around the battlefield and they will then swing their humorously sized weapon at the foe.
I got something for you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's almost it. There's little active to the combat. Instead, you'll eventually do nothing for a long enough period of time that you can use skills that have a number of confusing and confounding effects. But this boils down to some of the attacks being good as back attacks, some from the side, some from front on. So maybe the combat is more about positioning. So you're moving your character around, trying to get the optimum strategy going on, because it's the only thing you can actually do. You'll be jumping out of the way to avoid the enemy's attacks before swooping back in to really just mess everything up. Surely, right? No, of course not. It's just standing there and doing nothing. Look, the combat is not the most engaging.
What were they gonna do? Make me yawn myself to death?
More and more things to do in these instances slowly trickle in, but it can boil down to, well, this.
Powering!
Variable!
Alright, things are getting good.
Yes, this is early combat and may look bad, but
What were they gonna do? Make me yawn myself to death?
even further down the line, things rarely escalate from being a little tedious.
What were they gonna do?
There is something to be said about trying to line up a number of combos to enact extra damage here and there, but these rarely feel impactful, and come with the added bonus of you only having direct control of one party member, and it being slightly annoying to try and swing around everyone to pull off these combos, leaving you fully at the mercy of the AI to know what it's doing.
Make me yawn myself to death?
It mostly won't, and will frequently just clump together to get absolutely destroyed by a single move.
So, when's the battle happening?
That said, where more of the grit comes in is the classes. Throughout the game, you'll unlock extra classes for your characters, and when you play that class to a certain point, you unlock its various moves and abilities that you can then use to hybridize the other classes, which can be quite interesting. If it weren't for the fact that it does mostly boil down to chasing that dragon of unlocking things and just constantly switching to a new class as quick as possible and letting the game's auto build your problems away. A positive note is that the music itself for fights is kind of incredible and makes fights feel epic and engaging.
You can try a little harder.
Hey, you messing up today.
Enemies broken away.
Okay, not here, but other big bosses.
Well, don't you agree? It's the big bad boss. Boom!
Oh, I don't know. Maybe Lance was right. With combat like this, they may very well yawn me to death. This may seem overly harsh, but the combat in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it's still good, it's fine, you know? There will be moments where you're stringing together combos and it feels great as you're juggling aggro between your characters correctly and doing massive damage by just doing cool things. But then there's a moment where it takes just a couple of seconds, a bit too long for, you know, your skills to recharge, and then those doubts just begin to creep in. It's like when you're on any screen-based device and there's a fade to black transition, revealing the hideous ghoul that hides behind the entertainment, forever trapped in that black mirror, wasting away with each passing grain of sand. And then the excitement kicks up again and you're pressing buttons and it's great! Also, the chain attacks are always fun. This is where you string together a variety of moves and effects to deal massive damage and ultimately end up being a little fun puzzle for you to try and solve to make the most of your time. And boy, do they take up most of your time, as pulling these moves off take a while. Okay, look, I have been genuinely quite mean about some aspects of this game, but it is still good. It still presents a very interesting and gripping story about war and just the sort of futility of war itself and the way it consumes everything around it, and it is ultimately a futile endeavor. There are so many interesting stories to see and experience. There's this incredibly wonderful one about a little inventor boy who just wants to make incredible machines, but because of the world he lives in, he doesn't, unbeknownst to him, he is limited to just creating machines of death and destruction, when he just wants to create for the sake of creation and in bettering the world and pushing boundaries of what it could be to make machines. And it is so good.
The next time we meet, I'll make you into the best Levness there ever was.
The opening is incredibly gripping with some heartfelt scenes of despair and the horrors of war.
We won!
Your lives are ours! Your lives are ours!
The story continues to build further and further as you plough forwards in your quest to stop Mio dying of old age, and you're presented with more evidence of the existence of weapons of mass destruction than Tony Blair had, and the very real threat of them being used to annihilate your loved ones.
Are you tugging my wings?
Which pulls your party to stop in their tracks, despite the constant march of this dead line of damnation.
Gasp! Oh, the food's completely gone!
Except it then immediately pivots into a dumb side quest about collecting food. This isn't even optional. The main quest is to complete a side quest. That's just a main quest then.
But, Mio, a year from now?
Okay, Manana is kinda cute though. This is quite an issue with this game though. I alluded to it earlier with a funny little joke, haha, but here's the thing. I wrote that before I got to that scene, and then it, well, happened anyway, without even any form of, like, you know, self-awareness or anything. It's just a sort of massive tonal shift. It's an open world game that allows you to teleport all over the place, wherever, and for the most part, whenever you want, which means it can be quite difficult to maintain this constant sense of tone, because yes, one moment you could be hunting down weapons of mass destruction, and the next you're literally solving some kind of weird, confusing puzzle chamber, and it all just feels a bit odd. Did somebody say cooking? Right, Final Fantasy VII does this so much better. Oh, my saves have gone. Let's see, I think it's just do this, and then this, and... Oh, this didn't do what I wanted it to do. Why? Why did she have to die? Right, in Final Fantasy VII, the world is eventually going to be destroyed by a giant meteor. Pretty bad. But there's also an amusement park in the sky that you can go to once you've got full free reign of the world. However, you can only get to it by going through this small mining town that has previously been decimated by the closure of their mine under Thatcher's cruel assault on mining communities. Everyone's writhing around, lost to despair at the inevitable end of their planet and own existence, in which they can do nothing about it. What a mood. Then as you get into the sky tram, you're left with a lingering image of the meteor, a reminder of your forthcoming doom and what you should be tackling. While you gamble your life savings away at the races, slam some dunks and hang out in a haunted house, everyone around you is still quite wary of death. In order to enter Sky Disneyland, you have to stare into the very face of your own demise and be reminded that you are a worthless ant in the eyes of the cosmos as it destroys you with a casual flick of its wrist. In Xenoblade Chronicles 3, the whole world ceases to exist beyond the quest you're currently on. Weapons of mass destruction? What weapons of mass destruction? Let's take a tediously long time to gather vegetables. Yes, it ends up in a meaningful conversation between characters, and it's good, but there's so much that feels slightly ajar when the tone swings violently between mortality and merriment. And this is a shame, because honestly and truthfully, the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is compelling. When the big scenes kick in and the game decides to show you the actual story, it is great. There's so much to do, so much to see, and it's genuinely quite emotional at times. Oh, and I say when you get to it, because Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is kind of overly large, and it kinda sucks. Look, a big expansive world is great. It's what you want. You want to feel alive and like there's so much to do. But everything in Xenoblade Chronicles is so far away. Just miles and miles away for no reason. Exploration may be incentivized here, as maybe you can find some form of delicious treat by searching and exploring. Except what you'll mostly find is the same canister that you find everywhere, and maybe a really hard enemy to fight. Maybe these extra strong enemies here and there are good, right? They're a fun little inclusion, a fun challenge to do. Well, no, because Xenoblade has a scaling issue, in that if you do a couple of side bits and pieces here and there, or kill boss enemies in specific ways, which is a very easy thing to do, by the way, you will almost immediately become wildly over-leveled for where you are and for the next couple of areas, making everything just a bit easy, a bit too easy, and a bit boring. Whoopsie daisy. It's not that difficult to find yourself having broken the game's entire experience system by virtue of overkilling a boss enemy a few times and gotten multiple amounts of that succulent experience. Then, as you continue through an area, enemies simply stand and watch as you sprint through everything as if you're on the bleakest safari tour, only stopping to end the lives of the few foes who are foolish enough to attack you. The point is, for a game that is stuffed with things to do, areas to explore, doing almost any of it is actively harmful to the experience of the wider game. The way the class system works is that you ultimately end up sort of unlocking extra classes for each of your characters by engaging in combat. Great, there's gonna be a lot of it. But that's only if you're fighting monsters that are strong enough to, be meaningful fights. Which, as you're going to be over-leveled all the time, pretty much, means that you rapidly find that your people aren't actually unlocking anything, and it really ruins a lot of stuff. I didn't even grind. I didn't actually go out of my way to spend hours grinding and killing all these monsters. I just did the main story and a couple of the side missions to unlock the extra classes. And I did it in a way, sure, where I got extra multiplying bonus on experience on the bosses, but just that alone, not doing any side quests at all that I didn't need to do, still over-leveled me so that most new areas I came across were just me running past enemies that didn't care about me. And that just made the combat even more boring. But Xenoblade Chronicles 3 still manages to be a compelling JRPG. It still has a story that made me want to see more of it, with interesting ideas and characters that I genuinely grew to enjoy.
The sight of you things speaking the words of man. It makes my skin crawl.
So, what did we learn? Well, I learned that I'm apparently the exact same age as Sephiroth, which really makes anything I've done infinitely less impressive because, well, I've not actually been a genetic experiment even once, nor have I actually tried to commit omnicide yet. But we also learned that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a good game. Hopefully. Look, it's a lot easier to harshly critique something you enjoy than something you don't and actually loathe, because, all the things that are good, it's so much easier to get quite granular about all the things that just don't quite sit right. But while the combat is inoffensive at the best of times and the landscapes are broad and sweeping, overall it is an honest to goodness good game with a good story. It brings in JRPG elements, that classic nonsensical nonsense that you might love or might kind of hate, in a way that doesn't necessarily paint over everything else that it's managed to do. It's honestly one of the better JRPG experiences on the Nintendo Switch, and it's just got a very compelling story, fun characters, and it's just a good old time. Hello, and thank you for watching my video. It was about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's a stupidly long game that also involved me having to play all of pretty much Final Fantasy VII over a weekend because of a stupid little side tangent I wanted to do. View it this way, I almost also started talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, but that would have been excessive. But if you have thoughts about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 or the video that you have seen, let me know in the comment section down below, or leave a like or something. Otherwise, I've got a video up here. This is about a board game, for a solo board game. Ooh, want to play by yourself? Got no friends like me? Check this out. Or down here, which is a video about Vampire Survivors, which I thought was one of my games of the year. It's a fun little indie game, and the video is also weird. Otherwise, you can click on my face to subscribe, and thank you and goodbye.